from 89 seats in the previous parliament. And what's the plan going forward for the DA? Well, that's what was discussed at the Federal Executive meeting of the party yesterday. And joining me now from our Seapoint studios is Democratic Alliance National Spokesperson, Malatsi. Mr. Malatsi, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Good morning, Sakina, and all the viewers of Morning Live.
So, Mr. Malatsi, what was the mood like in yesterday's Federal Executive meeting?
Well, the mood was one of recognition that we are at a crucial moment, that we need to reflect honestly and robustly about our performance in this election, and we recognize that there's a lot of work that we need to do as an organization in terms of engaging where we came short in this election, because we are in this business to win votes, to grow, and to ultimately become a government, because we believe we've got a credible offer to South Africans, and that given the results of the election where we came short, we need to look internally at how we move forward. And that process of moving forward began with the Federal Executive meeting yesterday, that will embark on a process of reflection, on a process of reviewing our organizational structure to see where there may be gaps and where there are opportunities to fix what hasn't brought out the results that we wanted, so that at the end of the day, when we prepare towards 2021, we can ultimately regain the growth that we lost in this election.
Were you at all surprised at your showing at the polls, given that, of course, the party dropped from 22.23% under Helen Zille to 20.77% under Maimane?
Look, all indications going into this election was always going to be a tough result. However, the work that we had done internally and organizationally indicate that at the very least we would be able to maintain our support. Of course, the results are different to what we had anticipated, and we are now at a position that we are reviewing everything internally, including the results of the performance, to see what contributed to the loss of votes and what we need to do going forward so that we can get back on the path of growth.
I take it that means then that you were surprised by that outcome, especially given that the ANC had all sorts of problems leading up to this particular election, and you were actually quite bearish about your prospects going in.
Look, our prospects going into the elections were informed by all the work that we had been doing leading into the election, and in particular the momentum that we had gained as a result of the outcome of the 2016 local government elections, where we had grown substantially, ending up in leading coalition governments in 2 of the metros, and even the provinces that we had identified as provinces of opportunities for growth were informed by the fact that we had shown consistent growth in those provinces in the lead up to 2016 and post 2016.
So where did it go wrong, Mr. Malatsi? At least what are the initial indicators showing you?
Well, I mean, it would be very, very premature and reckless at this stage, because we are beginning that process at looking at everything holistically, from the campaign, from the organizational structure as is. The leader yesterday, one of the outcomes of Federal Executive was the announcement of a review of the organizational structure that will be led by an independent person. It has a mandate that it needs to at least conclude its work before the end of the year, so that we can look at what the feedback from that review process is and ultimately address the shortcomings that we encountered.
Can you explain to us what that actually will entail, this review of the organizational structure? What exactly are you looking at?
Well, we are looking at several things. One of those key things is, one, our nomination of candidates. I mean, in 2004, a similar process took place where the party reviewed how it selects candidates, how it runs campaigns, and how it changes its ground mobilization work. Part of the process that we'll be embarking on now also covers how we campaign, how we utilize our resources in the lead up and during campaigns.
So there was talk, of course, James Self being quoted as saying it does seem that people responsible for meddling in the US elections tried to meddle in ours. Are you trying to blame other forces for your decline at the polls?
Well, I've got no verification of those comments by our Federal Executive Chair, but we are not blaming any external forces whatsoever for the performance of the organization. What we are cognizant of was that internally there are factors that obviously by indications of the results contributed to our performance, and that we don't live in an isolated world. There are things in the political developments in the country that impacted the majority parties. The two biggest parties in the country lost votes, and part of our reflection is to look at every possible contributory factor that led to the votes that we lost, so that going forward we can know where did we come short and how do we fix this going forward. Because again, we are not in the business of losing votes. We do not like losing votes because we want to keep growing and ultimately become a national government.
So what are you saying? Are you saying, therefore, that this talk about the meddling by Russians possibly in our election was just an assertion by James South, and that you don't take collective responsibility for that utterance?
Well, I'm saying I've got no verification of those comments, Sakina. It will be reckless to comment on something that I've got no verification. What we are saying as the organization is that as a result, in terms of our performance in this election, we are looking at everything that we did that came short so that we can fix those loopholes and re-strengthen the organization going forward, and that this process of reflection and organizational review will reveal areas of improvement that the party needs to fix going forward, and that where we need to reorganize ourselves in terms of how do we approach and manage campaigns, how do we select candidates, how do we mobilize our party structures in preparation of elections.
Now, there's been a lot of public talk. There's also been analysis that you actually lost votes to the Freedom Front Plus. And again, some of the rumor and innuendo is that this is about the land issue. And perhaps also some talk that the DA has too many black leaders in the party, which did not bode well for some, and they decided to leave the party. What's your response to that?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of external analysis on the organization and what could have contributed to the loss of votes of the party. This is why, as an organization, we are embarking on this process of organizational review, which one of its key mandates is to establish what led to the loss of votes that we encountered. There are early indications by external parties and some analysts that show that we have lost votes to the Freedom Front. In response to your issue about, the rise of black leaders, I think as an organization we have been always very clear from the onset that we are a political home for black South Africans, for white South Africans, for Indian South Africans, because we believe in the vision of one South Africa for all.
So you've lost 2 seats in the Western Cape legislature, although you did win the province, of course. What will your new Premier candidate, Alan Winde, do to rectify those losses? Because you seem to be slipping in your stronghold as well.
Well, the positive thing about the Western Cape result is we still maintain a government with an outright majority, and the key mandate of Premier-elect Alan Winde going forward is to build on the momentum and the legacy of good governance, of the highest delivery of basic services that Helen Zille built. And the opportunity now is to take that to another level. The results show that the people of the Western Cape still have confidence in the ability of the DA to run a good governance administration, to run an administration that utilizes financial resources for improving their lives. And this is why, by all indications of basic service delivery, we continue to be a leader in that area. And the responsibility for the new administration under Alan Winde is to make sure that we continue consistently with that work and do so excellently, so that even those voters who would have left the organization because of many other factors can be pulled back by our performance in government.
And of course, some of the speculation is that Helen Zille may have cost the party with some of her utterances in the lead up to this election. Is that anything that you've discussed as the federal executive of the Democratic Alliance?
Absolutely not. There was no discussion about any individual at this stage. Hence, I indicated from the onset that the review process will curtail looking at what affected our campaign and impacted on the results that we had, so that we can speak with absolute confidence when the opportunity comes for us to say this is what contributed to our performance in this election. At this stage, a lot of external people are doing finger pointing and analysis, and of course it is their right to do so. But for us as an organization, we need to establish the facts. We need to do so thoroughly. We need to do so in a very careful process that seeks to find out solutions so that we can move forward knowing what we need to do in order to get back on the path of growth.
Mr. Malatsi, what's the future of your leader, Mr. Mmusi Maimane?
The future of the leader is that he was elected at our Congress last year unanimously. So his mandate ends at the next Congress. So his future is very, very certain.
And the future of the rest of the federal exec, because you talk about collective responsibility. So given that you have declined, what sort of responsibility are you going to take collectively for the decline in electoral support of the Democratic Alliance?
Equally so, the federal executive comprises of the leadership that was elected at Congress, including the provincial leaders and people who are co-opted in it. The federal leadership that was elected on Congress will lead the organization until the next Congress. With regards to the issue of taking collective responsibility, it is a recognition and acceptance from the leadership of the party that we are all, as leaders of this organization, responsible for the success of the organization and for the lack of it when we encounter it. The DA is not a one-man or a one-woman show, so during tough times, it is all of us that gather together and take responsibility for the health and welfare of the organization.
Well, thanks for your time. Democratic Alliance National Spokesperson Solly Malatsi there. And as you heard, they take collective responsibility as the federal executive, the leadership of the party, and they will embark on a review of the party's organizational structures to try and find out where it all went wrong. Let's leave that one there. Take a quick break.